In the aftermath of the great battle in the Orc war camp, on the outskirts of Fornost, the heroes gather to assess their situation of themselves and their dwarf and ranger companions. Several have been wounded, a few of them quite seriously. Hope and morale is low. The ruins of Fornost is their destination, and to the Hall of Eorendor they must go. The heroes decide that the wounded, at least, must travel back to Talendil's camp, but ultimately decide that all but the core fellowship of 5 should repair to the camp along with all of their mounts. The infiltration into Fornost, they decide, would best be handled by a small force, moving in secrecy and stealth. They make plans for the 5 to depart before dawn and make camp on the edge of the ruins to hide and rest. The remaining company will wait in the Orc war camp until dusk and then set fire to the Orc bodies and to the entire camp as a distraction for the Fellowship in the hopes of drawing out the Orcs from Fornost. Orcs come out, the Fellowship sneak in. The dwarves of the company had already smashed the Orc forge and much of the camp. The Fellowship were preparing to leave when from behind the palisade wall, Aramina walks into the camp and looks at each one of them in turn in the face, looking deeply into the soul. Then a grave look came over her face, and she spoke in a voice that seemed both here and there.
The Dark Lord has become aware of your actions and focuses his attention this way. I sensed it in Mormog, who has communed with the shadow in the east. I slipped away while he was distracted, and have shielded you from Sauron's gaze in this camp for the moment. It will not last, but you are safe for now. But you are all so battle-weary and wounded. That is something that I may be able to help you with. Please, everyone, gather around the fire.
Once everyone had completed the circle, she raised her arms and spoke with a voice even more otherworldly.
Asto Bethnim, Olo Danangala. Asto Bethnim, Olo Danangala.
The light of the stars shone down, and all were filled with a peaceful warmth. Spirits were lifted, and a newfound energy came over them. She asked about their plans and agreed that it was the best course of action.
A blessing of secrecy I give to you. A great evil lies down your path, but also a glimmer of hope. Farewell, my friends. May we meet again soon.
And with that, she departed. Days ago, Herobrand had sent out a bird messenger to scout out the suspected Orc slave camp to the immediate east. Just as the heroes were about to leave the war camp, the bird returned and informed them that there was indeed a slave camp there with humans and a couple of the little folk, being forced to excavate and expand a cavern system. The heroes made their way to the edge of the ruins and found a suitable hiding place to rest. As dusk approached, they prepared to venture forth into the ruins and awaited the distraction from their company. And quite a distraction it was. The flames licked ever higher and brighter as the entire camp was set ablaze. As expected, an Orc host of at least 30 came out of the ruins and made its way to the war camp. The heroes entered into Fornost when they passed. They came into the ruins from a path that descended into a ravine of hills and ruins. Nature had reclaimed a lot of the land. The road ended in a torchlit entrance into a tunnel. Fulvus donned his ring and scouted ahead. Upon exiting the tunnel, he found himself in an open area of the ruins where the orcs had obviously made a base of operations, until departing to investigate the raging inferno of the war camp. The ruins of a small keep lay on his right, on higher ground, which the orcs had apparently been using as a guardhouse. The castle, the Hall of Eorendor, lay before him, and on his left the ruins rose up a hill that the orcs had been using for lodging. He crept up to the keep on his right and climbed a tree that grew within it to get a better look of the castle. Thankfully, with the help of his ring and the blessing of Arowena, he remained quiet and unnoticed. For located at the base of the castle, an area that couldn't be seen when he exited the tunnel, was a torchlit entrance into the bowels of the castle, guarded by 2 large orc guards, 3 orc soldiers, and above them a small group of goblin archers. This was enough for him, and he returned to find his companions, who had grown impatient and moved to the mouth of the tunnel, where it opened up into the area before the keep, and informed them of what he learned. The heroes, feeling that they should act quickly, for fearing that the host of orcs would return, decided to set up an ambush for these orc guards and goblins, to gain access into the castle. What were they guarding? Wanderer, Bane, and Herobrand hid themselves behind ruined remains of walls. Angamandil positioned himself where he could sweep around and flank the orcs once the ambush had been sprung. Fulvus climbed up into the keep and found a barrel of some orc brew, and rolled it down the stairs and crashed into the courtyard below. The orcs took the bait, and the orc soldiers moved into the courtyard to investigate. The heroes attacked, and Herobrand cleaved one of the orcs in 2 instantly, and charged up the keep to join Fulvus, who had taken up an overlooked space to use his bow on the orc guards and goblins. Bane dispatched his orc target with 2 swings of his mighty axe, and then joined Agamandil as he charged toward the orc guards. Wanderer's target was especially agile and dodged her swings of her sword a few times, before she slew him with a single blow. Fulvus hit one of the guards with a well-placed arrow. Agamandil and Bane engaged the guards, who proved to be a formidable enemy, while Fulvus took out 2 of the goblins with headshots. Herobrand, growing impatient with his bow, leaped down majestically from the keep and climbed up the remains of a buttress to reach the goblins, where he cleaved one in half and the other ran into the castle. Wanderer caught up with Bane and Agamandil, and together they slew the guards. Bane and Herobrand chased into the castle to head off that goblin, for fear he would warn others. The goblin did not get very far before both heroes landed a killing blow simultaneously. Bane separated his legs from his body, while Herobrand cleaved his torso into 2 pieces diagonally from shoulder to ribs. With the guardians dispatched, the heroes turned their attention to the dark corridor leading into the bowels of the castle. A feeling of great evil came up from the tunnel and swept over them. Summoning up his courage, Fulvus donned his ring and scouted ahead, the dread increasing as he went. Corridors and chambers opened up on either side, but the orcs had apparently not shown any interest in them. Torches led him further down the corridor, and then down a great stair that descended far below. At the bottom of the stairs, the corridor moved off to his right and opened up into a large and tall natural cavern that had been further excavated. Here he found the apparent source of evil, for the feeling overwhelmed him. In this multi-level cavern that was well lit with braziers, he found more orc guards and soldiers, numbering about 6, and a handful of goblin slaves. But the greatest focus of the room was a giant orc, larger than Fulvus had ever seen before, stood down at a lower level and was whipping ferociously a victim Falvus couldn't see from his vantage point. Upon this orc's head was an iron crown, wicked in its design. The presence of the shadow overwhelmed him, and he stumbled as he prepared to leave. This giant orc could be none other than Vrak, and at that moment he looked up and made eye contact with Fulvus, with eyes made of fire. This surprised the hobbit. How could he be seen? Summoning up his courage once more, and despite being flooded with the dread of the shadow, he moved back up to his companions to inform him of the horrors below. The heroes made their way into the depths of the castle and down the great stairs. They deliberately made noise to attract the orc guards and soldiers into the corridor, thinking that it would be best to eliminate as much of the enemy as possible to make their assault on Vrak easier. A loud and deep and bellowing voice shouted out in the black speech,
Bohom Margium.
The orcs did take the bait, but things did not go quite to plan. Wanderer was hit with a single mortal blow from one of the large guards, and fell unconscious at death's door. Angamandil, who was already wounded from his battle at the gate, took a further major injury and became very weary. Fulvus immediately moved to tend to Wanderer and successfully stabilized her to save her from death. Bane, Herobrand, and Angamandil proceeded through a battle that they thought would be quick and easy, and slew their enemies, although they had taken some damage. Herobrand and Bane led the way into the cavern, with Angamandil following after, despite his injuries, to confront Vrak. In a deep and mocking voice, Vrak bellowed,
Nuzda Giat. Nuzda Gahul.
and looked straight at Herobrand with fire in his eyes. Some foul power of the shadow overwhelmed him, and he collapsed into unconsciousness as Vrak leaped up to the middle level of the cavern to face them. Bane charged forward, and he too felt the shadow overwhelm him, but he managed to stay conscious and sink an axe blow into Vrak, who returned a serious blow with his large, jagged orc scimitar. Angamandil knew this form of sorcery that overwhelmed Herobrand, and shouted out, "A song will wake him!" He proceeded to sing, but his injuries prevented him from getting the words out. Fulvus rushed out from the corridor, confident that Wanderer would be okay, and belted out a song of victory, which Herobrand awoke to and burst into action. He charged Vrak and hit him with his mighty sword, but was unable to deliver a lethal blow. Angamandil tried to land a blow with his sword, but was too weary to make a connection. Vrak hit Herobrand with his scimitar, and Bane countered with a killing blow with his axe. Vrak stumbled back and fell back down to the lower level, and Bane leaped after him to make sure he was dead. The crown rose up from Vrak's head, seemingly on its own, before the translucent image of a specter materialized, towering over Bane, and screeched. The spirit, now wearing the crown, began to flee the cavern, but not before Herobrand, with his magically blessed sword, was able to land a blow. Bane turned from that lower landing and discovered who Vrak was whipping. It was Oric Thornbeard, the son of the Baron of the dwarf halls of Ered Luin, and none other than the object of their quest, Thorin Stonehelm. Despite this discovery, Bane felt that the spectre must be dealt with, and left Angamandil and Fulvus to tend to the captives. Bane and Herobrand chased after the spectre through the ruins of the castle. Knowing his axe would be of no use against this entity, he grabbed Wanderer's blessed sword as he ran out of the cavern. The two heroes confronted the spirit in the hall of the Orinder. The spirit stood in front of the throne, and looked out upon the pillared hall. Herobrand and Bane both landed blows against this evil. With a look of evil from the specter, visions of torment entered Bane's mind, and the shadow came over him. He was able to kick this from his mind, but it physically damaged him greatly as it left his body. And with this attack, the spirit had depleted its power and vanished, leaving the crown to bounce down the stairs of the dais of the throne. Bane used a cloth to scoop up the crown without touching it, while Herobrand inspected the throne. A radiant star was carved into the head of the throne, which was surprisingly intact despite its age. He sat down on the throne and was immediately cast into a vision of the past. Sunlight beamed into the throne room, and a host of elves stood before him as they once did. It was a time of peace, and Herobrand was filled with hope before the vision faded.